Okay, so I did timing for you guys. I did the transmission. These are new cylinders. His other ones needed replaced. They weren't savable, so I just threw a set of standard new ones on. I also didn't show you the head. I haven't decided if I want to show heads yet, just because they're kind of involved. I mean, it's simple, but at the same time, there's just like not a whole lot to show. It's not very entertaining, I guess, but maybe in the future I'll do one. And then I also have the primary assembled, new chain, and then new clutch pack, but everything else is still in good shape. So, and then new high output stator and rotor. But yeah, just threw all that together. Again, I don't know, there's not much to show. There'll probably be another video later on if I decide to put some of that together. But now I'm going to show rocker boxes. I get a lot of questions about those, or guys just say they struggle with them. So I'm going to make a quick little video on rocker boxes. So let's say you just took apart your cool new project and your rocker boxes look like this. They're ugly and grimy and you want it to look all pretty. So you're going to take them apart. I always suggest put it back on, because then you can kind of get your spindle started by beating on this junky old acorn nut, because you do not want to pound on the end of that because of the threads. So you beat out the spindle, and then you're going to pull all these guts out, and then you're ready to clean everything up. Then you're going to have a nice pretty rocker box ready to be reassembled. Really the only thing that you need to look at on these is to make sure these studs are nice and snug, and also not stripped out, because the last thing you want to do is go assemble it, and when you put the nut on and tighten it down, it just pulls the stud right out. So definitely something to look into. Other than that, there's not a lot. Sometimes these will be split down because people had leaks and they just thought, I'll just tighten it more and more, and then they destroy the rocker box. These threads here are also something to kind of look at. The inspection caps will often get loose, and so people over tighten them, and then they'll pull all these threads out. So that's ugly too. Pay attention to the way it comes apart, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. I've taken apart a lot of rocker boxes that were assembled incorrectly or had the wrong parts in them, because it's whatever somebody could find at the time. It always goes flat washer, spring washer, rocker, flat washer, rocker, spring washer, flat rocker, or flat washer. The flat washer with the smaller inside diameter is the one that goes on the oiling feed end. You'll notice how on like the rocker box, larger hole, smaller hole. So that means this is the exhaust rocker box, because it's going to go on the front of the engine, because that's the side that the rocker feed goes on. And if you're sitting on the bike, it's always on the right side. So exhaust intake, large hole, small hole, small hole. I'm going to show you how I assemble these. I struggled a lot with the first couple I did, but now I've kind of got it down to where I can do it relatively quickly. Yeah, so blue Hylamar for the O-rings on the end. If you are going to use the O-ring installation tool, make sure that your spindle fits through. This one's snug, which is fine, but you want to make sure it actually goes through, because what happens is a lot of people will hammer on the ends of these, and it kind of flares that edge, and then when you go to use this, you're going to either ruin your tool, or it's just not going to go through the way it's supposed to. So check that fitment first before. Like I said, these both are kind of snug, which is fine, but sometimes they just won't even fit at all, and so you have to either, God forbid, get a new one, or just clean up this edge with like a really nice file or something. put your new O-ring on. I use Blue Hylamar too, when you kind of final assemble it. Okay, so you have a new O-ring on the end of your spindle. If you're going to use this tool, now would be the time to install it, snug it up against that new O-ring. Normally I would fill this tube with assembly lube, but for this, just to kind of keep things easier, I'm gonna leave it dry. I'll go back and reassemble it and fill the whole thing with assembly lube, but definitely make sure you've got something. Engine oil, I really like assembly lube for a lot of reasons, but just make sure it's lubricated. Lay out your rocker box. Start on the larger end, not the cap end. Take your rocker, drop it down in. Take a spring washer and a flat washer, and you're gonna pair them up, and then take your pliers and grab the loose end and the flat washer together like that, and so you've got it kind of pinched into a nice flat pack like that. Flat washer against the aluminum, because that spring washer will spin and it'll chew up your rocker box, and you don't want that. So you want to put the flat washer against the rocker box. You push that down in there like so. You get it, close enough, but it'll just hold the rocker in place. And then start your spindle. Kind of wiggle it around. Okay. So now we know everything's pretty well lined up. Back it back out. Take another flat washer, and you're going to push the rocker kind of down to give yourself that little gap there. And then you're going to drop your flat washer down in there. Spindle's in the way. Back it out a little bit more. Okay. So now wiggle it around until it finds its way. Okay. So now we got flat washer, spring washer, rocker, flat washer, rocker support, and now we're going to put another flat washer on this side, but you're going to want to back that spindle in order to give yourself room to drop your next rocker down in. And now you're going to, and I do everything kind of like tilted up like this, just to kind of keep it all, the gravity help you out, I guess. And then just kind of wiggle it around. Okay, until it starts to come up again. So now you've got just that little, oh, it's too bright. You got that little gap left there. And you're going to put another flat washer and spring. But this is the flat washer with the smaller inner diameter. So this is like the regular ones that go through, the spindle goes through those. This one goes on the end. So you're going to take your other spring washer. You can see how gnarly the edges are on those things. That's why you don't want it against the aluminum, because I've seen when people assemble them without these flat washers, and these just spin as the rocker goes up and down, and it just chews the hell out of the edge of that rocker box. So you want to grab it all. So he's got a nice compacted assembly there. And you're gonna push it all back down in. This is where you're gonna end up using your picks a little bit, because you can't manipulate the spindle anymore. So you kind of have to use a pick to make sure everything's as aligned as you can. So if you look down in there, okay, so kind of, it's a little dark, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a pick and I'll wiggle around in there and, kind of align it the way it needs to be. And then this is where you'll drive that spindle the rest of the way home. Since this is a demonstration, I just pulled this off so I could show you. This is where you want to add some blue Hylamar to, just to give that O-ring a fighting chance. These need to be like really tight, because when you tighten the acorn nut on this end, you don't want it to spin, because once that starts spinning, you're never going to get that end tight, so it's going to leak. You're never going to get this end to seal, and that's going to leak. So it's a real mess. Like I said, this tool is to kind of help guide that O-ring in there so you get a nice tight grip. If you don't have this tool, if you're just working on your cool old chopper and you just need to get the thing back on the road, blue Hylamar, and then just gently drive this in with like a brass punch or a brass hammer. Just don't get carried away. Tap this in, and what's going to happen is you're just going to kind of shave a very light ring of that O-ring off, so it's like the perfect fit. Like I said, if you can use the special tool, it's better. If you don't, I've done plenty of them without the special tool, and they didn't leak. I got a good amount of blue Hylamar, I drove it in nice and true, everything went nicely, got a good seal. So that's not to say you have to have this. Again, go on to Franz and Grub, order a tube of this. It'll last you forever, so get some of that. But anyway, I'm not going to drive this in because I need to reassemble it with lube and save that O-ring, but you're going to just want to check to make sure that all of your springs are doing their job. Just play with each rocker, move it back and forth, make sure everything's loose, make sure it goes up and down nicely, there's no catches, no nothing. You just want to make sure everything's lined up as nicely as it can be, and then it should all just drive in, everything should be good. If you notice that maybe one of the springs is being compressed, maybe your rocker can wiggle back and forth and like knock back and forth, or if you notice that the spring is being pushed together, it just needs to be moved. You can get in behind it or on top of it or however you need to do it, but the lip on this lip right here will sometimes catch on like the edge of one of the springs, and it will compress it. And so if that happens, all you have to do is go in there and manipulate it a little bit until you'll hear it snap back into place, and it'll be free again. But as long as you can kind of spring them back and forth, that means everything's aligned properly and you're good to go. So that's how I do it. This trick here where you just grab it, I think is kind of the easiest way to do it, because you can grab it, compress it, slip it into where it needs to be, let go. That's just how I prefer. It is a little bit messier because obviously it's oozing out assembly lube, but for this one I just did it dry so you guys could kind of see what's going on. The other thing I would always suggest is I pull these studs out, and then I'll check this gasket surface to make sure it's flat, because like I said, some people get really carried away with tightening them down to try and stop a leak, and it will kind of distort the surface. The other thing that happens is people use like screwdrivers and chisels to remove the rocker box, and then they also use them to scrape the gasket. So these actually look like they're in really good shape. I'm still going to go check them on my surface plate, but that's the only other thing I suggest is, one, to check the threads behind these to make sure they look good, and then to make sure your surface is flat. Other than that, it's really not too hard. Hopefully that's helpful. I know I was talking to a guy the other day that said he really struggles with them, and I just think the experience of putting so many together kind of gave me a decent, quick little routine of doing it, but hopefully that helps.